Oh, now you thought that the Steve train had stopped, that it had derailed after yesterday's absolutely brilliant performance on the 5 stupid things about the wage gap. But no, this is from even before that. This is only a couple of days ago. This is Steve Shives, or Steve Shives, trying to basically rebrand Atheism Plus for a new audience. And failing brilliantly. Yeah, I know, you're thinking, Mitch, too much Steve Shives. But how can you have too much of that bearded, bald, smug, social justice warrior? I know I couldn't have too much of Steve Shives. Besides, tomorrow you're getting something absolutely brilliant. So, stay tuned, bitches. And let Steve Shives do his shilling. You know, Vindicator pointed this out, and it's very, very, very true. I mean, even in a simple intro such as this, Steve Shives can't look any more smug than he usually does. It's supposed to be light-hearted and fun, and oh look, his little girlfriend is kissing him on the cheek, yet he still looks like a smug little bastard. Sorry, Steve. I don't like calling you names because, you know, I think Steve is better than that, but you do look a bit smug.
Hey everybody. You probably noticed that I'm in a somewhat unfamiliar location. Well, that's because I'm shooting this video at my granny's house. Today is what my pap used to refer to as Miss Daisy Day, when Granny has her hair done. And since Pap died about 10 years ago, it's been a duty, an honor really, that myself and my brother and my dad have sort of traded at various times.
Ah, so I guess that white knighting runs in the family, does it not? Just joking, Steve.
It's been my duty for the last few months, and I am alone in Granny's house.
Oh, Steve, please. I don't swing that way.
While she's getting her hair done, I have about half an hour or so until it's time to go pick her up. So I thought, why not shoot a YouTube video?
Why not, Steve? What could possibly go wrong?
And I was just sitting here thinking, do you think it's at all possible that we could make intersectional atheism into a thing? These are the sorts of thoughts that I have when I'm sitting in my grandmother's house. Essentially a second home to me my entire life. I sit around and I think, what about intersectional atheism?
And it's thoughts like this, which is why, Steve, you have had such the fall that you have had. What is this? Basically a rehash of Atheism Plus that you've concocted in your head, and now you want to kind of sell it to us. I don't think we'll be fooled twice, mate.
I know that for many people, atheism is just a description of a state of unbelief relative to the existence of gods. To many people who identify as atheists, that's all they're talking about.
Yes, Steve, and that's what it should be. It shouldn't have to deal with any more of these bullshit things that Atheism Plus tried to bring into it. You know, like gender politics, intersectional politics, civil rights. Look, you can be an atheist and support, under your umbrella of humanism or egalitarianism, all people's rights. But your atheism is your lack of belief. Atheism does not extend to stuff like that. It just doesn't. That's just stupid. Religions don't do that. Yeah, apparently atheism has to include gender politics, specifically feminist social justice politics. Look what happened last time you tried to do it, Steve.
But there is also such a thing as the atheist community.
So what, Steve? That doesn't mean you have to politicize it for the good of your own agenda.
When atheists get together, talk about religion, talk about science, talk about common interests, talk about political issues, maybe, that are of shared interest to us. We have an atheist community.
Steve, do we even understand the atheist community? We can't agree on absolutely anything, which was why the Atheism Plus debacle was so fucking horrible in the first place. You are assuming that the atheist community is some homogeneous blob of people that agree on everyone and everything about every subject that we talk about at the conventions, when that's never ever ever been the case. Because we're supposed to be free thinkers with our own minds and opinions, and look what happens. Look what happens when we disagree. When everyone disagrees on something. Sometimes it will bring about a fruitful debate, other times it will bring about nothing whatsoever. Other times it will bring in infighting, like social justice warriors when they brought in Atheism Plus.
And when some of us within that atheist community decide to maybe try and do something in terms of social or political action, then we have not just an atheist community, but within that community, an atheist movement.
No, Steve. We have a few people, or one person, which is what the language you were using was inferring, doing their own little thing because of their politics or whatever they believe in. That does not make an atheist movement. It does not.
So if there's going to be an atheist movement, and there is, and there has been for some time, I'm not suggesting that there isn't one. There is one, and I feel like in my own paltry way I'm a part of it. But if there is going to be an atheist movement, that movement has to be intersectional.
Did I ever tell you what the definition of insanity is? Insanity.
If it's going to get anywhere, and if it hopes to have any support and respect from other movements.
Oh, so the respect and appreciation that Atheism Plus got, Steve. Do you even remember what happened?
That are similar.
So other toxic and failed social justice movements. Right, gotcha.
One of the most profound things I've ever heard relative to the atheist movement was said by my friend Meridian Frost a couple years ago in a hangout that we were both guests on. And he didn't say anything revolutionary, but the way he phrased it, he stated it in such a succinct way that it opened my eyes and it made everything so clear to me as to how the atheist movement has to relate and has to exist in terms of its character if it wants to truly succeed.
So we adopt the politics of a minority within the movement, a vocal minority who have an agenda that they want to push in order to somehow relate to other people. Apparently just being atheists isn't enough to relate to people like me who are mixed race and an atheist. So apparently to get other atheists who aren't white and straight and not feminists, we need to appeal to other people who are atheists but who aren't straight, white and atheist and male, by being intersectional, even though these people will gravitate towards us because we're atheists and they need people who they can relate to, but just because of the atheism should be enough. But no, instead we have to do it because they're not white or something. We have to try and appeal to them, when surely our shared lack of belief is enough. Steve, it's stupidity is what you're arguing for.
And have its goals accomplished and recognized in our larger social and political world. And that is...
Again, no it doesn't, Steve. No it doesn't.
He said, the atheist movement is a human rights movement.
Jesus Christ. Where to start? That is one of the most bullshit statements I've ever heard. And you honestly thought that that was a really interesting thing that he said, that you had to change your entire outlook, even though it's not that revolutionary, when in fact it's not revolutionary, it's stupid. Steve, the atheist movement / community, it's not a human rights movement. It's a community of people who lack a belief in God. Christianity isn't a human rights group. It's a religion. Atheism is not a human rights movement. It is a lack of belief. The atheist community is a community of people with a lack of belief in God or gods. That's what it is, and that's what it should remain. If you want a human rights movement that are built up mostly by atheists or non-believers, humanism is that movement. But no, apparently we have to have Atheism Plus. We have to try and get the atheist community to bring on board the Atheist Plus ideals again, despite the fact that a lot of people are sick of you, Steve. Sick of you. But, the definition of madness, if it just do the same old shit over and over again and hopefully it'll work. No, Steve, it will not work, no matter how hard you try to rebrand it.
And as such, it has to ally itself with other human rights movements. It can't be an enemy of human rights movements, of other human rights movements, and it can't afford to be indifferent to other human rights movements. It can't afford to just narrowly focus only on its own goals and its own interests and ignore those of others.
Yes, it can, Steve. Yes, it fucking can. It doesn't need to become a civil rights movement or a human rights movement. It's a non-religious community. It is a lack of belief community, and that's what it should remain as. Let atheism stick to its own goals. If we keep adding on all these stupid other objectives that have nothing to do with atheism, we're going to get nowhere. We're going to have what Atheism Plus did. Stop trying to push Atheism Plus on us again. It's not going to work because it failed to work the last time in the exact same way as you're trying to rebrand it as. You're rebranding it in the same way. If you want an atheism/non-belief human rights group, go for humanism. But oh wait, no. Humanism isn't good for you, social justice warriors, because it also helps men.
Because for one thing, atheists are such a diverse group. By definition, the only thing that atheists have in common is that state of unbelief in gods. So we're a very diverse group. So atheism, movement atheism, has the potential to be the most intersectional human rights group that there is.
You just contradicted yourself there, Steve. The only thing that we, diverse group of atheists, have in common is the lack of belief. Yet here you are trying to say that the diversity is somehow something that means that we do have something in common, that we're all the same because of our diversity. If we can't agree on anything else outside of that lack of belief, how can we be the greatest intersectional human rights movement of all time? Look what happened when Atheism Plus and PZ Myers tried to make that happen. It failed because, one, your ideology is toxic. All that intersectional politics does is, ironically, divide people. It divides people. It makes people hate each other because the social justice warriors are a hateful group of people. So they create hateful ideologies. And yet here you are thinking it's still a grand idea because atheism is diverse, therefore it should be an intersectional human rights movement, despite the fact we already have a human rights wing of atheism and non-belief, which is humanism. But because it helps all of humanity, you have a problem with that, so you need something else, which will help only the so-called oppressed people, the people that social justice think are oppressed, namely privileged, rich, white women. But never mind.
Because atheists come from all walks of life. Atheists are men and women. Atheists are of all gender identities, of all sexual orientations, of all nationalities. Atheists are of all ages, of all income levels. Atheists are a huge cross-section of humanity.
So are religions, but you don't see them trying to be intersectional civil rights movements.
Because we are only united in our atheism by that simple state of unbelief.
Yet you still think that this intersectional civil rights movement can possibly blossom because of this diverseness. Because we apparently all agree on things. Eh, Steve?
That simple form of atheism that I spoke about at the beginning of this already rather rambling video
is the only thing that anyone in that community ever agrees on, Steve. The lack of unbelief. Come on, Steve Shives. Mr. Shives. Can you not even compute the stupidity right now?
So we should be intersectional.
No, we shouldn't, Steve.
And intersectionality is very important. Intersectionality means that you don't just worry about the interests and the concerns of the group that is the center of your movement.
Intersectionality is only important to the social justice wing of atheism. Oh, and apparently intersectional politicians only care about people other than themselves. And how come they don't give a rat's ass about white men? How come they really hate them? How come every single one of them I've ever encountered on the internet and in person absolutely loathe them? Especially when they're straight and cisgendered, they really hate them. That doesn't quite make a whole lot of sense, Steve. Can you explain that then? It's one thing telling us that we should be intersectional because we shouldn't be thinking about our own wants and needs as a community of atheists. Yet, practice what you preach, intersectionalist.
You also worry about the other identities, the other categories that members of your movement fall into.
So, give people like me preferential treatment over others because of what I am on the outside rather than what I am on the inside. So, basically, ignore all the goals that atheism needs to achieve. We've got all these other goals to achieve. Then we can go about doing atheism's shit. That is such stupidity. Atheism is not an intersectional movement. When people tried to make it one, they failed, Steve. Even minority atheists are not necessarily interested in their own minority goals when they're in the atheist community. They would like to deal with atheism's goals first while doing their other goals in their own spare time. Remember, you don't have to be one amorphous atheism movement in order to be an intersectionalist. You can go around doing other bullshit stuff rather than trying to make the movement you're part of that. And besides, we already have a human rights movement, humanism, but you don't care about that, Steve, because humanism cares about all humans, and intersectionalists and social justice warriors only care about a fraction of humanity, themselves.
When we talk about a concept like privilege,
I was waiting for the first buzzword to arrive.
most of us are privileged and underprivileged in various ways, depending on the different categories we fall into and the different ways that we are treated based on how we are perceived by other people.
Unless you're a straight white male like you, Steve. Isn't that correct? See what I said, people? Intersectionality is divisive and horrible by its very nature. These social justice warriors are not interested in unity and trying to help people. They're only interested in divide and conquer tactics in order to push their agenda and control people. That's all they're in it for. They're in it for control. They want to control the movement. Again, don't let Steve Shives trick you with his attempted rebranding of Atheism Plus. It's not rocket science. You don't need to read between the lines. That's exactly what he's trying to do. In fact, just read Atheism Plus's little thing about themselves on their website. It says they're intersectional atheists. That's all he's got it from. That's where he's got the name from. It's not rocket science. He's trying to rebrand something by doing the exact same thing that they did. And of course, that's the definition of insanity, isn't it?
So, take me for instance. I am really ridiculously privileged in almost every way.
Oh, here we go, people. Here we go. He's going to talk about his privilege and why his privilege is why we need intersectional politics in atheism. Oh, shut up, Steve. It's not working. People won't be fooled twice.
I'm an American.
I don't remember nationality being a privilege, but oh well. Everyone knows that privilege is a ever-evolving thing that the social justice warriors love to use. I mean, at first it's your gender, next thing you know it's your nationality. They can never quite get a stable definition, mainly because they want everything to be fluid. And if we don't consider something fluid, we are shitlords.
I'm white.
Yeah, of course, being white means you're privileged. I mean, it's not like you have to be rich in order to be privileged. No, you can be poor and white and be privileged. Apparently.
I'm male.
Oh yeah, Steve. Brilliant. Brilliant example of privilege, mate. Absolutely brilliant.
I'm cisgender.
Which has nothing to do with privilege either, considering whatever gender that you may well be has no bearing on your background, wealth, your state of well-being, your quality of life. It has no bearing on that. It's where you've been born in society. But of course, it's not a class issue with social justice warriors, because if they were actual Marxists, they wouldn't be saying gender, they'd be saying working class, and bourgeoisie, and upper classes. But no, instead it's women, minorities.
I'm heterosexual.
So, there are gay men that are richer than you, have better jobs than you, hold positions of power higher than you. That's not a privilege.
I'm a native English speaker.
What the fuck, Steve? So am I. I'm from the place that gave you that fucking language. Doesn't mean that I've got a privilege. What the hell? My family's never been privileged, yet we all speak English.
While I am by no means financially well off. In fact, by most estimates, I would be near the poverty line in terms of my income. But my standard of living is fairly good because my wife and I just have each other to take care of and our cat, and we live in a small apartment and we don't have very many bills, and we're fortunate enough to have gotten our educations without having to go into deep debt. So we're actually doing pretty well. So I feel like I'm not underprivileged in that way.
So by reality standards, you're not privileged at all, mate, but to you you're privileged, therefore atheism should be intersectional. Right, Steve, right, got you. I get you there, mate. Oh, you've totally convinced me. Oh, and she's your wife. Forgive me for the couple of minutes ago where I said she was your girlfriend. My bad.
Either. Really, the only category that I fall into, the only identity that I have that is underprivileged is the fact that I'm an atheist.
In America, at least, that is actually true. The atheist community is kind of oppressed. I don't like using that word because, they've dumbed down and completely obliterated any sense of meaning that word has in this day and age. But yes, atheists are a group that are maligned and on the margins in America. Not so much over here in Europe because, for whatever reason, atheism has more of a foothold here than over there. But that's besides the point. So despite that, despite not being rich at all, everything else, apart from his atheism, makes him a privileged white shitlord. Intersectionality, people, like I said, is divisive. All he's described himself as is a category of categories upon categories of categories. He's not a human being. He is a category of categories. God, privilege, right, is like a shit stain that no matter how hard you try to rub off, it keeps getting bigger and bigger because it just won't clean. That is what privilege is. And intersectionality is worse. That's basically what Jim Crow was back in the day, but we can't be doing that because this is progressivism rather than regressivism, Is anyone on board with that? I don't know. Just wondering.
And I don't really feel underprivileged.
Well, good for you, Steve. That does not mean that atheism should become intersectional and reintroduce Atheism Plus that we kicked out a couple of years ago. Okay?
Because of my atheism, because I am so privileged in all those other categories I just mentioned.
You kind of proved the opposite there, Steve, but never mind. You're a privileged shitlord like they drummed into you, like they taught you you are. Don't mind us. We should all be brainwashed along with Steve Shives because that's for the good of the community, for the good of humanity, for the...
And plus, the circles I move in, both on the internet and in real life, are not circles in which I'm penalized for being an atheist. My friends and family are all either non-religious themselves or religious, but of the sort that is open-minded and tolerant, or at least indifferent to the fact that I'm an atheist.
You kind of proved the opposite there, Steve, but never mind. You're a privileged shitlord like they drummed into you, like they taught you you are. Don't mind us. We should all be brainwashed along with Steve Shives because that's for the good of the community, for the good of humanity, for the... Still, none of that provides you a case for intersectional atheism, Atheism Plus. That doesn't make a case for you being privileged. You just have friends that are religious and non-religious like everyone else. How does that make you privileged? Like I said, it's a shit stain that gets bigger and bigger.
Atheist. So I don't really feel punished for being an atheist.
Yet you feel punished for being privileged. Well done, Steve. Well done.
In my life. But if I worked at a workplace or lived in a community or had a family that was very religious, that was not as accepting or tolerant of atheism, then I would certainly feel underprivileged. I would certainly feel discriminated against or perhaps oppressed.
So you just contradicted yourself yet again. You're oppressed, but not oppressed for being an atheist in fundamentalist America. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense, considering what the media is constantly saying about you, about what the televangelists are constantly saying about you, what the creationists online are constantly saying about you. Yet apparently you're not privileged or oppressed. Well done, Steve. Well done.
Due to my atheism, as many atheists are, as many atheists do feel. And to take this back to intersectionality, if I were an atheist and I were not a white person, but I were a person of color.
So basically, Steve, someone like, well, I don't know, who's brown and a bit skinny, used to have long, dark, black hair, he's from England, his dad's mixed race, he's mixed race therefore too. Oh, he's working class. I mean, I guess it must be me.
I would feel less privileged.
I don't feel unprivileged because I'm an atheist. In fact, I feel quite the opposite because, oh shit, it's Mitch's Law! Is this Mitch's Law now? Is this finally in effect where a feminist or a social justice warrior, or anyone in particular, argues a case or a point from their own particular point of view, you know, but specifically an American point of view or a British point of view, and projects it onto the world? Is this what he's saying? Because atheism is not necessarily the protected minority group that Steve Shives thinks it is, like in America. Although, to be fair, it's not protected, but you see what I'm talking about, people.
Than I do. If I were poorer than I am, if I were in an economically desperate situation where I really was feeling the pinch of not having a lot of money, then I would feel more underprivileged.
I am under crippling student debt, and I'm from a family that has never ever had that much money. Yet I still don't feel particularly privileged or underprivileged, because, you see, I know that I have the ability to rise above that. You intersectionalists only believe that I have the ability to rise above that with your help. It's funny how you try and claim that we're human beings too. They need our help to become human beings. Intelligent.
And all of these categories that we fall into.
You see, we're all categories. We're not human beings.
Overlap with one another. And when you are underprivileged in multiple ways, those different forms of underprivilege, those different categories that you are penalized for socially and economically, they amplify each other. If you're poor, then it sucks to be poor no matter what else you are. But if you're poor and black and poorly educated, and you have a bad job or no job, and you live in a violent neighborhood, or you are also gay or transgender, or you're not a native English speaker and you're sort of discriminated against because of how you speak English or because of your accent, all of those things add up and they amplify each other. So
Jesus Christ, that was some slippery slope snowball effect you had going on there, Steve. Jesus fucking Christ. So you could be white and have all those problems, yet it wouldn't be as bad because this person is white. They would just be privileged regardless of that. Like you just said, you're poor and you're an atheist, yet because you have friends who aren't atheists, who don't judge you because of that, and because you're white and you don't have as much debt as other former students, and because you're straight and you're cis, which I hate that word too, but everyone knows I hate that word, and all these other shit things that intersectionalists love to tell white people, you're privileged. Divisions, people. Divisions, categories. Intersectionality in a nutshell, people. I don't even have to repeat myself or say anything more about that.
intersectionality is very important. That's why it's important when people say that, for instance, they are an intersectional feminist.
So what's that got to do with people like me and feminism? What's feminism got to do with me? Hell, what's it got to do with you? I'll tell you it in a little bit, Steve, because I want you to try and, think of it for yourself.
Their primary concern, if they're describing themselves as an intersectional feminist, then their primary concern, at least in terms of this conversation, is feminism, is women's rights.
So basically, fuck all to do with me. Okay, thank you, Steve, for not coming up with it. I tried to, give you the opportunity to think of something for yourself for once, but sadly, you just couldn't. You couldn't treat us like human beings. Instead, you had to treat us like the noble savages, those who could have a chance of being civilized by the white man. But instead of it being to do with race nowadays, or at least on the surface, instead it's the feminists and the intersectionalists and the social justice warriors will come to the lands of those who are unprivileged and raise us into privilege, because without them being their burden, how can we possibly rise above the position of unprivilege into a equal society where the white man is pushed down and instead the white woman is put in his place, where we will all benefit from her white woman's burden? This neo-colonialism that feminism is trying to construct. Isn't it great, people? Isn't it great? God save the Queen.
But as an intersectional feminist, they are also concerned about how transgender people, or people of different sexual orientations, or people of different nationalities, or people of various income levels, or various levels of ability, are treated within their movement. If you have an intersectional human rights movement, it's important for you not just to ally yourself with other movements, but also to make sure that you are being aware of how people of different categories and different levels of privilege within your group are being treated. So to take this way back all the way around to the idea of intersectional atheism.
Yes, Steve, you brought us back on track before, but then we got sidetracked yet again, and now we're back on topic, hopefully for the end of this fucking video. You're trying my patience.
If we want to have an atheist movement that means something to us, that means something to our society as a whole, that can do positive things for atheists, then we not only need to continue to bang the drum about secularism and maintaining and strengthening the wall that separates church and state, and fighting for good quality science education, and keeping creationism and intelligent design out of public school science classes, and all of these things that have rightly become very important, prominent issues of the atheist movement. We not only have to keep doing that, but we also have to center and lift up the members of our own atheist community who are underprivileged.
No, Steve. No, we do not need to put people like me on a pedestal because we have to look like we're for equal rights. Is this seriously what intersectional atheism is? Just like, oh look at us, we totally treat our minorities brilliantly, don't we? Oh, yes, we're brilliant, we're all for equality, us. Is that exactly what intersectional atheism is going to be? Notice, people, that he said creationism and intelligent design, which is the same fucking thing. It is the same thing. Intelligent design is the rebranded creationism. When creationism was first debunked and people saw that it was basically a pile of bullshit, the creationists rebranded it as intelligent design in an effort to further push it into science classes. They failed at that too. Notice the similarities in that argument, with Steve Shives arguing for intersectional atheism and the creationists arguing for intelligent design. It's the same thing, only Steve Shives is doing it with Atheism Plus. He's trying to rebrand Atheism Plus into intersectional atheism, which was already a thing anyway. That's what Atheism Plus was, intersectional atheism. And it never took off because we rejected it, because it's not where atheism needs to be. We have a community that we feel good at, that we feel good about, without the need for intersectional atheism, without the need for making people more equal than others, for putting people on a pedestal just because of their form of religion or their nationality or whatever the fuck he was on about. That is not the way to do it. You're doing it because they're a minority, not because they have a good thing to say, because they're smart, because they are revolutionary in their ideas. You're doing it because they are like me, brown, or black, or gay, or what the fuck ever. You're not doing it for that. You're doing it because they happen to be something that you're not. And that is inequality. That is the opposite of what you're trying to somehow fight against. And apparently the atheist community has a problem with equality, that we're not equal enough, that we don't give them time. We give them time. It's called freedom of speech in a debate. They have a voice, their own voice. They have their own unique individual voices that are being heard, and they don't need your fucking help to have them, Steve. Do you not understand that this neo-colonialist, noble, savage, white man's burden, oh wait, more white woman's burden, isn't it, really? Bullshit. You know, treating women and minorities as victims that need someone's help in order to raise themselves above unprivilege, which is basically saying we need to raise them from barbarism into civilization. That's what you're basically arguing for. Yet you are so stupid you can't even notice that. Face it, Steve. You're doing the same things that the creationists are doing in order to rebrand Atheism Plus, and it's not working. You're coming across as an idiot, as a bit of a bigot if you read between the lines, and you're just a social justice warrior trying to push social justice in. But like Kevin Logan's trying to do, to clean out atheism, he's blind to the fact that it was he who was cleaned out by the atheist community. And so you people shall remain blind to that fact, because every time we try to show it you just put your fingers in your ears, you close your eyes, and go la 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 la.
Within the group, we have to make sure that we are making an effort. Those of us who are in the more privileged category, those of us who are atheists who have it pretty good relative to others, we have to make sure that we're making an effort to amplify and lift up the voices of atheists who are people of color, and gay atheists, and trans atheists, and atheists who are of lower income backgrounds, and atheists who are of different nationalities or come from different cultures or who come from different religious backgrounds. Most atheists in the United States who come from a religious background are former Christians, but there are also atheists who are formerly practicers of Judaism or Islam or Hinduism or many other religions. And we need to make sure that those voices aren't drowned out.
Who would all be kicked out of intersectional atheism, by the way, Steve, in case you didn't know what happened with Atheism Plus. You can parrot the diversity argument all you want, but the fact remains, if you make atheism into intersectional atheism, if you make the movement intersectional, these people will be kicked out because they do not meet the status quo's demands.
One of the best things I've seen in the atheist community, the atheist movement, I should say, you know, my friend Neely is always good to remind me that there is a distinction between the atheist community and the atheist movement. But anyway, one of the best things I've seen in the atheist movement recently is a new show that Tom Leeds hosts on the Secular TV channel, the collaboration channel that I've mentioned a few times before in videos I've done, and I've appeared on their channel for shows.
Stop shilling, Steve Shives, and get to the point.
A couple of times. Not everybody on that channel is my cup of tea. Not everybody on that channel is someone that I can say I agree with or that I would want to be associated with, but they have a diverse group of contributors. My friend, one of my favorite people, Christy Winters, has done things for them, and Tom Leeds, who I gave a shout out to at the end of the most recent You Had to Ask video, has a show that he just started on Secular TV's channel called One Old White Guy, that is hosted by him, who is the titular old white guy, and the premise of the show is to interview and highlight members of the atheist community who are not old white guys.
So, young white guys?
Because as a future old white guy...
Oh, that future's already come already, Steve.
I have no problem with old white guys, but I do have a big problem with the face of the atheist movement being dominated and defined by old white guys. I love Richard Dawkins. I think Daniel Dennett is super. And, you know, I was a great fan and admirer of Christopher Hitchens.
Oh, really? Do you mean people like Sam Harris, who's only in his 40s? He's an old white guy? Really? Or do you have a problem because these people are held in high regard by the atheist community, yet they are not held in high regard by people like you because they're old white guys who don't agree with you? because they don't believe in intersectional politics and social justice. That's why you have a problem with them. Is that right? Is that right, Steve?
But I don't like the idea that old white guys are defining the face of the atheist movement. It should be more diverse. It should be more inclusive.
No, Steve, that's not what you're talking about. You see, P.Z. Myers was the face of Atheism Plus, and he's an old white guy, but because he's also a social justice warrior and an intersectional politician. You have no problem with him, do you? You have absolutely no problem with him. The reason why you have a problem with these old white guys being the face of atheism is because these people don't have the same politics as you. Because Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, and I don't know about the others, apart from Christopher Hitchens, I know about him too. Yes, I'm not talking about popularity, I know who all of them are, I'm talking about what they believe in. The other three, they all criticise Islam, and social justice warriors don't like people criticising minority religions, even though Islam is, of course, worshipped by people of all races and all colours and nationalities. There's over 1 billion of them. 1 billion Muslims. No, that's racist, and for some reason, despite the fact that is an ideology, a Muslim is simply the moniker of a person who believes in that ideology of Islam. It's Islamophobic because they're minorities, because apparently being a Muslim means you are brown, when that's not the case at all. They don't know their history. In fact, at one point in the medieval era, Muslims controlled half of Spain, and last time I checked, Spain was a white country. But anyway, that's why you don't like these old white guys being the face of atheism. It's because they don't agree with your politics. That's why, Steve. That's why. And you don't like the fact that atheists of all colours and nationalities and privileges, as you like to say, hold these people in such high regard and want them to be the face of atheism, the voice of all the voiceless atheists, because that goes against your agenda. It literally is a smack in the face, Steve, isn't it? That's why you don't like them. So don't bullshit us and say it's because you want it to be more diverse. Diversity is the excuse for you wanting to end their voices, to stop them being in the position that they are in, to stop people deciding on who they think should be the voice of atheism. And don't worry, once these people have had their time, there will be younger voices to take over. We don't know who they will be. We don't even know what they will look like. But they will be chosen by the atheist people, the atheist community, and not by you.
And I wish that this show that Tom does would have 1,000 times the audience that it has. Right now, he just started, and Secular TV as a channel is still growing, so the audience for One Old White Guy is not huge at this point. But I would love to see that grow, and I would love to see that activity, that attitude, that idea of those of us who in the atheist movement who are in a more privileged spot, who have things maybe a little easier, or those of us with YouTube channels who have larger audiences, to lift up those who have smaller audiences in the atheist movement and who have something interesting and unique and personal to them to say, and especially those who fall outside of the old white guy category.
There's nothing wrong with helping people grow their YouTube channels, but there is a problem when you're doing it not because they're good, but because you're privileged and you're doing it because they're not privileged, which is so stupid. The idea of privilege shouldn't even remotely exist, but it does. It shouldn't exist. At least it shouldn't exist in terms of it being a racial, gendery thing. It should be what it is. A class-based thing. A wealth-based thing. But you guys changed it into what it is now. And this is why we're having arguments like this, Steve. You see, these people shouldn't have to promote these other people just because they're minorities. How do you know that because they're minorities they've got something interesting and unique to say? You don't know that. Harlan Ellison once told an anecdote of how when more women writers joined the sci-fi community, he thought that there would be a load of interesting stories, unique perspectives to be told. But that was not the case. Instead, it was very much like the male guys are already there. You have a minority of people who are geniuses and push the sci-fi world beyond what it currently was. And the rest was just fluff. Shit. And that's not because they were women, but because they're human. Very few people are interesting and unique and who push boundaries. Most people are just shit. They're shit. They have nothing unique and interesting to say. And the reason why your social justice friends channel isn't that big, beyond the fact that that other channel is still growing, is because nobody in the wide world, the vast majority of people, do not like social justice warriors. They do not like your ideologies. That's why. It's not because, oh, the world is oppressing you. No. It's because we don't like what you have to say, therefore we don't listen to you.
Who can bring something new and fresh and interesting and add their voice and their faces to the face of the atheist community and remind us that if the atheist movement is to truly be an effective and positive human rights movement, then like the Black civil rights movement, like the gay equality movement, like feminism, like all great modern civil rights movements, human rights movements.
I would not call feminism a great civil rights movement. It was the women's movement that was the great civil rights movement, not feminism. But oh well. We can't let pedantics get in the way, can we?
It must be intersectional.
No, it doesn't, Steve. No, it doesn't. The Black civil rights movement was not intersectional. The gay rights movement, up until very recently, was not intersectional. And neither is the atheism movement. It is not and will not be intersectional because we've already had a civil war which has proved that it will no longer be intersectional, Steve. You do not need intersectional politics in order for a movement to be great and to succeed. And also, atheism is not a civil rights movement. Atheism is an anti-religious movement. But then again, you don't have to be anti-religious. You just have to stop these religious people from destroying the separation of church and state, and to stop bringing creationism into science, because it's not science. That's all we need to do. You do not have to be anti-religious to be an atheist. But at the same time, you don't have to be a civil rights activist to be a part of the atheist community and an atheist movement. Steve, you just don't understand that not everything needs to be a civil rights issue, like you intersectionalists think it ought to be. It doesn't have to be.
It must be an ally and a friend to other human rights movements.
No, it doesn't, Steve. We do not have to poke our noses in businesses that is not our own. We do not have to be allies of other civil rights movements. It doesn't mean we will look better for it. It does not mean we will find other allies. If we ally ourselves with other civil rights movements, we could find ourselves having more enemies. I'm not saying that it's necessarily a bad thing. I'm just saying that we don't have to do it, because their goals are not necessarily our own goals. And you can just do it in your spare time. You don't have to bring it into the movement. You don't have to force all of us to go along with your own civil rights movements and your own activism. We could do it in our own time. We don't need you to do this. Plus, we have humanism, which I keep saying. We have humanism. We have egalitarianism. We don't need to do all that with atheism. Atheism has its own goals, separate from other civil rights movements. In fact, atheism itself is not a civil rights movement. It is a movement of atheists. A lack of belief. A movement for secularism. Need I say any more?
And it must center and focus on the members of its own movement, of its own group, that are in the most need of lifting up and the most deserving of having the attention and the focus.
Steve, all of that sounded exactly like what the colonialists used to say back in the 1800s, what the Brits used to say. It's funny how the student becomes the master. That is exactly what they used to say. Those deserving peoples who deserve to be raised into civilization from the barbarism that we found them in. We're on a great civilizing mission to end barbarism and to bring Western values and Christianity onto the world. This is what we're fighting for. That's exactly what you're saying. We need to raise these black people, these brown people, these gay people, these women from the unprivilege that we white people have bestowed upon them for the last several 100,000 years, even though empires and oppression comes around in circles, and we were once oppressed too, but, you know, we've never been oppressed because that's what social justice, feminism, and intersectionality tells us. We have to raise these people because it's our burden. Ho 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 ho. Do you not hear the neo-colonialism that is pouring out of your head from your mouth, Steve? Do you not hear the bigotry that's coming out? How anti-white you sound, how racist you sound. Because apparently white people's voices should be taken away from them and given to other people because they take their voice they've always had for granted. Even though not all white people have a voice. In fact, not all minorities have a voice. In fact, some minorities have more of a voice than them. Yet apparently they're still less privileged than these white people. You are racist, Steve. You are sexist, Steve. You are a neo-colonialist, Steve. That is what you are. You are a social justice warrior as well. You are an intersectional politician, Steve. And this is why Atheism Plus failed. You are also a hypocrite, Steve. Because you hate these white people who are old, who don't agree with you. Yet you acknowledge and respect people like PZ Myers, who are also old white people. But because they agree with where you stand. Because they are the same as you. Fuck off, Steve.
That us white guys, old white guys, and soon to be old white guys have always had and have taken for granted. That's very, very important. And those are just some of the things that were on my mind sitting here in my granny's kitchen. Isn't that weird? The things I think about when I'm alone in my grandmother's house.
That is a gross understatement, Steve.
And I guess I could have just gone over and stared at the china.
See it all crumbling down, smashing onto you. That'll be quite funny. Make it happen, Steve. That'll be a great comedy skit.
Or something. What do you think of this wood paneling? Isn't this great?
I've had enough of you, Steve, for 1 week. I guess I was wrong in the end. Okay. This has been ChowieMan93. Like and share the video, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you all later. For tomorrow is going to be quite the video. Please, pray for me.